Hi, everyone. I'm Dan Jones. Welcome to Interchange. Interesting stuff to talk about today. UWM is on the verge of tremendous growth and expansion, but will it continue with the resignation of the chancellor? We'll talk about where that high-speed train between Milwaukee and Madison should stop and pick up passengers if the thing ever gets built. And we'll talk about one of the top prison officials in Wisconsin being given permission to live outside of the state of Wisconsin. We will also talk about the story that never dies, the quarterback who never retires, Brett Favre coming back for one more season. Joining us today are Kevin Fischer, an aide to Republican State Senator Mary Lozick, oftentimes a host over at WISN Radio. Denise Callaway, she's the communications director for the Greater Milwaukee Foundation. And Gerard Randall, well-known consultant and local job creation expert. Rick Horowitz will be along with commentary at the end of the show. All right, let's talk first about UWM. It's on the verge of tremendous growth, increasing popularity. There's a new school of freshwater sciences. There's going to be a new school of public health, probably at the Pabst Complex downtown Milwaukee. A new engineering campus, probably on the county grounds in Wauwatosa. Given the credit for pushing all of those things forward is a man who announced this week that he's leaving for a new job, Chancellor Carlos Santiago. You have to wonder if they can keep the momentum going without him in place.
I think they can, in large part because he has a good team of people there who really have done a lot of that work with him or for him in some cases. And I think the interesting thing about Dr. Santiago is that certainly he has academic credentials, but he was really, really good at building partnerships with people in the community, with organizations in the community. We saw that through the incredibly successful fundraising effort that they had. We've seen that through things that he's been able to do to bring these two new schools. And it's a big deal to be able to bring two new schools like this to this university. So he has done an incredible job of building partnerships, being innovative, kind of sometimes, even though it wasn't to the liking of the faculty senate, looking outside the box in terms of where UWM could grow. And he managed to also pick places when they were off that main campus, places that were highly visible. So I think he did an incredible job. I think he's got a good team that's there. And I think what the Regents learned from this particular hire is that if you're going to be in an urban setting, you need to have someone who's going to be able to take advantage of the partnerships that exist there to really move the university forward.
Kevin, for so long, UWM had this reputation of being a commuter school. It was a place you...
Still does.
Yeah, but I think they're losing that. It's becoming more of a destination school instead of a commuter school for people who can't afford to go somewhere else. I think people are wanting to go to UWM. And somebody told me the other day that 90% of the incoming freshmen now want a dorm spot.
And there's no question that UWM has grown exponentially, and that is in large part to Carlos Santiago. It will never have the stature of UW-Madison. Never. It will always be, as we've mentioned on this program, the evil stepchild. However, its reputation has grown, and Carlos Santiago, he couldn't have done all he did to build the university and its profile unless he had people behind him, backing him, and supporting him. And he's got that. Now, let's be honest. With him leaving, that is a temporary setback. It's going to take a while to replace him. And what does the university do in the interim? Does it put itself in park, or does it keep the momentum going and put itself in drive? Where I work at the state capitol, Carlos Santiago was always there, and I hesitate to use the word lobbying because it can have a negative connotation. But he was there working on behalf of the university at the state level. Whoever takes his place is going to have to work just as hard because that's what that's what got UWM going in the direction it is, and it is going to. Everybody's got their chancellor in place now with the new school year coming. We will not have a new chancellor at UWM until next school year. We'll have. I spoke with a high official at UWM today. Probably have an interim chancellor by the end of September. And then there'll be a nationwide search, and maybe by March of April we'll have some candidates. And by the time next summer rolls around, we'll probably have the replacement. What does UWM do in the interim? We cannot let the momentum die, and that's why the team in place must continue to keep that Santiago ball rolling.
How do they do that? Because all these things right now are on the verge. It's not, the engineering campus in Wauwatosa, that's not a given. It's pretty close, but it's not a given. School of Public Health, that's not a given. What they just purchased Columbia Hospital, what's going to happen there, nobody knows for sure. How do they keep the momentum going if they don't have a live wire like a Santiago or the Dynamo who was his predecessor?
Well, first off, I think you get a seasoned chancellor for the interim position, someone like a David Ward that has been a part of the system for a long time.
He was bought into the Santiago plan.
Absolutely. He, and I'm speaking of the David Ward that just most recently served as the interim chancellor at UW Green Bay, had been a senior vice president for academics within at the system level before. You've got guys like Tom Lujak that certainly can carry on the advocacy efforts. You've got people like Mike Lavelle, who's the dean of the School of Engineering, Steve Percy, who's the current founding dean for the School of Public Health. Those people are folk that I certainly believe can carry forward with the vision that the last two chancellors had, both Nancy Zimpher and Chancellor Santiago. I think it's interesting that in this community, we've got 3 searches underway now for presidents or chancellors, UW-Milwaukee, Cardinal Stritch, and Marquette. Marquette will probably announce fairly soon, I'd say within the next 2 months or so, who will be replacing Father Wild. Cardinal Stritch, no doubt it will be sometime early summer, late spring of next year when that person is announced. And it'll probably be close to that track for a new chancellor for UW.
So do they all have to outbid each other?
Well, I think they're
going to be looking
the same
for very
kind of
different.
person.
Well, but I think they want them to also fit somewhat of a different mold, though, in each of those schools. Obviously, any school now wants somebody who's going to be able to get out there and fundraise,
Dynamo,
to do partnerships that are really going to be critical to success. But I think that one thing that UWM is done now and has really been able to position itself as a major urban educational institution. And I think that, something that Kevin said a little bit earlier, where, UWM will never be UW. I think Nancy Zimpher started it. I think Carlos Santiago really wrapped it up to say, we don't need to be a second UW-Madison. What we have are really great abilities to do things here that are going to be unique to this campus, that are going to be quality educational programs, and we're going to be able to raise the money. That's the big thing he did.
Oh,
he raised a lot of money and raised a lot of money for research. That's what makes the difference when you're talking about a top-tier educational institution, and that's one of the reasons I think they're going to be able to really attract some quality candidates.
I give him credit for coming up to Madison, where there's an anti-Milwaukee sentiment in that whole building, in that whole state capitol, and going up there and selling UWM to people who probably don't even want to give a nickel to the city. He worked hard at it.
All right, next topic. The controversy over this planned high-speed train between Milwaukee and Madison just doesn't end. Now they keep arguing about where the thing should stop if it ever gets built. Should it stop in Wauwatosa? Should it stop in Brookfield? Should it stop in Oconomowoc, Watertown? And if it's really a high-speed train, should it be stopping at all once it leaves the downtown Milwaukee Amtrak station? I can buy into the argument of Wauwatosa around the research park and all that, but I think all the communities are a little worried about, are you going to give us money to build the station, or is it going to cost our community a bunch of money?
Right. I think you're right. And I think for that very reason, this is a plan that already is controversial in some circles. I think the State Department of Transportation is being really smart in saying we want to identify those places where we think there's going to be community support for a stop along this high-speed train, which, as we sometimes seem to forget here, is not just a Madison to Milwaukee train. That's going to be an important leg of it. It's going to really be from Chicago to Minneapolis. So, we're just part of the piece that has to be done. So I think that the state's being very smart in terms of taking a look at places that want it, places where it makes sense. You are going to have some stops along the way. But remember, again, we're not just looking at this 90-mile stretch. What we're looking at is building a 21st century transportation system that's going to link our communities much in the same way that the interstate transportation system did back in the 40s and 50s. And I think we'll all remember, though I know none of us are that old, but we've heard that was really critical in terms of of business development and growth throughout the U.S. And I think that's the way we need to look at this. This is a 21st century interstate system.
I think they're realizing that if this thing is going to support itself in any way, it's going to have as many passengers as possible.
Well, it's not.
You're not going to pick them up in Oconomowoc. You might pick them up in Wauwatosa.
I'm not sold that this is going to happen, first off. And I also believe haste makes waste. What the state government and in many ways the leadership, Tom Barrett and Jim Doyle, what they're pushing for is to get this thing off the ground, have as many anchors in place so that if a Scott Walker or Mark Newman is elected, so much of it will already be moving forward that it will be difficult to put the brakes to it. We currently have runs of Amtrak between Chicago and the Twin Cities of St. Paul and Minneapolis now. It stops in the Dells. That's the closest stop to Madison that it makes. So this is really an expansion of that. And it does get back to the question of whether or not that $800 million that they are looking to spend is the best use for that money at this time. I just don't believe the government has its priorities straight. So if they move forward and they settle on places along this route for it to stop that are close to Milwaukee, and they get these people to begin to put their investment of an infrastructure in those communities in place for stops, then it will be a lot harder to back up and say, we can't do this.
But it's interesting to see these communities now, Kevin, go, yeah, we might be interested in the train station, but are you going to pay for it completely, or do we have to come up with a few million?
Well, and they're right to be worried because the amount of money and stimulus that is going to pay for this train is not enough to cover the yearly operating costs. We're millions and millions of dollars short. Someone is going to have to come up with the tab, and of course, that someone will be Wisconsin taxpayers. Early on, politicos in Waterloo said, we don't want it stopping in Waterloo. I mean, why would you want to stop in Waterloo? Watertown. I have to tell you, I work for a state senator, for Senator Lozick. This is politically unpopular. The calls we're getting, the emails, it steadfastly opposed to this idea for many reasons. The expense is one, and the concern that it will be a boondoggle. There is no definitive evidence or data or studies that show that there will be any significant ridership here. Now, I'm a prime target for this baby. I should love the idea of, getting in this train and going from Milwaukee to Madison, where I work. However, I'm not keen on the idea of driving downtown and trying to find a place to park and then walking to the train station and getting on the train station that will travel, 50, 60 miles an hour, that might get me to Madison in 2 hours, and it will drop me off where? Blocks and blocks and blocks and blocks away, and then I'll have to take a bus to get there. It's going to make 3 or 4 stops. And I'm with you. I'm not sure that this will fly because Scott Walker, who I believe will be the next governor, has said, who are you trying to say to us, Secretary LaHood? Well, we're going to ram this down your throat no matter who the governor is. No, Scott Walker says if I'm a governor, I'm going to turn that money right back to the feds, and this is done. And that will be a very popular move.
And we'll be once again left out of an opportunity to create some economic growth and development by having, again, a system that's going to move us quickly and move businesses and ideas quickly from one part of the Midwest to another part of the Midwest. I can't help but wonder, if we were doing this show back in the 40s and 50s when there was all the discussion of we need an interstate transit system, if you wouldn't have said that wasn't a good idea either, because you know what? We already had roads that would take us one place or another. The only thing that an interstate transit system did, one of the main things that it did, was to move people more quickly. That's precisely what this train is
Denise,
going to do.
you're talking cars as opposed to a train.
It
is not analogous. It is not analogous in this day and age when people have a love affair with their cars, and you are going to have to be very, very, very enticing to get them to get out of their car and ride this train from Milwaukee to Madison. And what the fee every day, what it's going to cost. And let's talk about jobs here. The Journal
fees
Sentinel
that
did a
we pay all
report
the
that it would
time.
only create 55 permanent jobs. It's a waste.
There are fees that we pay all the time when it comes to doing things in our cars, and it's called a gasoline tax. Part of the reason that we have this love affair with our cars, is because we do not have a convenient way to get
we do. It's called our cars.
No, it isn't. It's not a convenient. There's no convenient alternative. There isn't. What this is going to do is provide a convenient alternative that, again, is going to be an engine for economic growth and development. This is going to
55 jobs.
If that were the case, it should stop.
That's 55 jobs for that. You're kind of missing the big point and the big opportunity here.
Then it should
for
stop
jobs
in
to be
Wauwatosa
created.
if it's going to be an economic engine development. And the state has already refused to have a further discussion on that because they said it would take too much additional time in order to determine whether or not that would be one of the best stops.
Tom Barrett this week said that we should build more highway lanes between Madison and Beloit and Janesville. Why? For economic development. Well, if that's the case, then let's build more roads between Madison and Milwaukee and get rid of this idea of the train, because Milwaukee is the economic engine of the state. Why should we build a train between Milwaukee and Madison, but build more roads between Madison and Janesville? Makes no point.
Because it does make sense, because we're talking about this 90-mile stretch being part of a larger piece of the puzzle. There is no discussion of a train between Madison and Beloit. There is discussion, and we're moving forward on this high-speed train between Milwaukee and Madison that is a link to the rest of the country.
It exists already. I'd like to know what the ridership is
Not
for the train
much.
now between Milwaukee, the Dells, and the Twin Cities.
And you know why it's not much? Because you're missing that
Because
key
people don't want to
important
ride
place.
if they want to ride
No,
their
you're
cars.
missing that key important cog in this, and that is the ability for it to stop in Madison. Because it's not just about whether or not it's convenient for state government. I'm sure, Kevin, you get out in Madison a little beyond the state capitol, and you'll know that we have all kinds of innovations and business parks and incubators that are there. Those are the people that it's for, not for casual riders like us.
All right, next topic. I love the story that broke this week about the top manager with the state's prison system who's supposed to be available on a moment's notice in case there's a riot at any of the 36 prison or correctional facilities in Wisconsin, who doesn't even live in Wisconsin anymore. His managers gave him permission to live in Galena, Illinois, and their explanation is that the guy is going to retire anyway in January, so what's the big deal? Oh, and he parks his state cop car 5 miles away from his house on a grade school parking lot, so at least it's parked in Wisconsin. What an incredibly
I bet he doesn't take the train to work.
What an incredibly cavalier attitude people develop, I think, after being on the public payroll for so long. Oh, yeah, this is all right. No, it's not all right.
It's why people hate government. They read this stuff and they just shake their heads. Now, I can make the argument, well, if the guy does the job and he's effective and efficient, then what's the problem? The problem is that it just smacks of irregularity. We had a situation years ago with our Attorney General, Peg Lautenschlager. The State Ethics Board did an examination of her, and they found that she was using her state vehicle for private use, which was fine, but she was using it far beyond the limits that she was supposed to. And that's where you raise your eyebrows and say, is that happening here? If he can do the job from his home or on his way to Galena, and when he gets to, that's fine. However, it does kind of smell funny.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to make any sense at all.
It smells like lutefisk kind of stick.
What a great idea. I think the reason it seems like it's weird is because it is weird. How can you have this gentleman, and I think to me the key thing is, this is a guy who's got to be ready at a moment's notice to respond to any kind of disaster.
He's not a Wally Cox look-like bean counter.
No,
he's dealing with very serious
critical
emergency situations
that can impact people's health and safety and even their lives. I don't think you can do that job if you don't even live in the state. If it was a 6-month window, I don't know why he couldn't have waited to move to Galena. And if it was that critical with only 6 months to go, then he needed to resign his position.
Talk about a lack of any realization of public relations. Why wouldn't you say, okay, it's only going to be 6 months. Why don't I just keep living in Wisconsin for 6 months and then I'll retire?
Right. And that's where the whole notion of this is a cavalier response to public perceptions. The public is already fed up with what they perceive to be a lot of waste and fat in government, government officials who don't hear them. And I also take a look at this and say it then gets us back into the more local issue of the residency requirement that we have for police and fire fighters who are supposed to be available in these local communities to immediately respond.
We make
Can you
them
imagine?
live within
we
certain
make
boundaries.
them live within the confines of those municipalities. Here you have a situation where the guy was given permission to be outside, should have thought, you know, if I'm going to be this far away, then why don't I just resign and let an interim who can be more available take the spot?
That's common sense, and let me tell you, that doesn't dominate in the public sector.
All right, we have to talk for a few minutes about Brett Favre. So he's back in Minnesota, getting ready for one last season with the Vikings. Now, I'm in the minority on this. Sure, his behavior on the whole retirement thing is weird, but if you want to take advantage of his talents and abilities, the price you pay is putting up with his odd behavior. He's not like the rest of us. He's not going to think or act or do anything the rest of us would. And I'm a true believer, if you want to take advantage of his talent, if he says, I want a pretty blonde to bring a cupcake to my locker every day, every day at 3 o'clock p.m., you do it. You do it.
I've asked for that on this show for 10 years.
I think if you wanted to play,
you know what? I wasn't going to say a word about this until you said what you just said. I don't think we have to put up with his behavior. I don't think we have to tolerate it.
Thompson didn't want to, so he got rid of him.
Well, and can you blame him? I mean, can you blame him? Think about what's happening in terms of, you know, the Minnesota newspapers. And let's say you're another member of the Vikings team. Nobody gives a darn about what you're doing because it's all, what's going to happen with Brett? What's going to happen with Brett? Who cares?
The Vikings care because without Brett Favre, they are Tavares Jackson.
That's right.
And they aren't going anywhere. Suddenly, the last few weeks, national pundits are saying Packers in the Super Bowl, Packers in the Super Bowl. Now the talk is he's either Dallas or Minnesota.
I think the Minnesota coach is brilliant to put up with it.
Well, it's entertainment.
It's
entertainment. Sports is entertainment. These guys have huge salaries. They wouldn't be able to get those salaries without endorsements and TV contracts. The bottom line is whatever Brett is doing, he's selling tickets, he's selling TV commercials,
games.
He's winning games, and he's put Minnesota back in.
You know what? This is
He's weird, but he doesn't act like the rest of us would act because he's treated differently from the time he was 12 years old.
Because he's this smiling,
He's not going to
country,
act
likable
like we
guy.
are.
And you know what? He's not the first or the last. Professional athletes stay out of training camp. It's been going on for years, but he gets crucified for doing it. Everybody does. Not everybody, but there's a lot of stars that have done it.
Joe Namath never would have done anything this weird.
He would not.
Right.
Well, he just
Did he put on nylons?
But you know, I think the thing about it is we're also seeing much more attention paid to this because we have these 24-hour news cycles now, not just, you know, with news channels, but also with ESPN and ESPN 1, 2, 3, 4, and I mean, does it go up to like what, 95 now? So you've got something that you've got to be able to fill the air with.
It's become a soap opera, and a lot of times it's been wrong.
I mean, we talked about it here. Tractor Watch.
Terrell Owens has his own TV show, and it can't be any more entertaining than what Brett Favre has produced for free.
Oh, but you know, the thing is, you are going to be in so much trouble when you get home, and I hope you enjoy that cupcake in the doghouse.
Oh, I don't think so. I think he's secure in his manhood. And what about a blonde bringing us cupcakes on this show?
You know, if that's what he wants to do, I'm fine with that.
You know, the sight of Brett Favre reappearing at somebody's training camp is one sure sign that August is finally here. The problem is there really aren't a lot of other signs at all. Rick Horowitz has been thinking about that when he has the energy. Rick.
August, the month without a theme. Even the calendar doesn't care about August. Try to find another month that doesn't have even a single decent-sized holiday. You can't do it. There aren't any others. And the poets sing the praises of April and May, of June and July. By August, the tank is empty. I know, I checked. The best they can come up with is a verse like this: dead is the air and still, a tideless expansion of slumber. Thanks a lot. The word you're after is lassitude, or at least you think that's the word you're after. You really should Google it to be sure, but you just don't feel up to it. It's not an evil month, August. It's a perfectly good time to take a vacation or toast a marshmallow or take a cold shower so the neighbors don't come home one day and find you collapsed in a sweaty heap in front of the mailbox. It's simply a month that lacks soul. Mostly August is a victim of bad timing. Tuck it into the calendar a couple of moons earlier, after March, say, and folks would welcome it. It would be like winning a trip to the tropics without ever leaving home. Or call it up in mid-November, and it would be a last shimmering reminder of those summer days left behind. But sitting where it is, it's got trouble. And the trouble is, you've seen it all before. It's called July. You've already had 31 days that look pretty much like these 31. Just about as hot, just about as sticky. If you hated July, you'll go crazy in August. And if you love July, you'll be bored. But then you start to notice it's hard to see the ball by the end of the evening softball game. You find you're cleaning out the barbecue grill in the dark. You wonder what you did with the sweaters. And then sometime in those 31 days, it will rain, a steady chilling rain for a day or even two, and everything that summer is will come to a stop for as long as the rain falls. Oh, the sun will come out again, the heat and the haze will return, but now, in August, you've seen around the corner. There's a change coming.
Well, thanks, Rick, and thank you so much for watching. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
It's the time of the season when love runs high. In this time, give it to me easy and let me try with pleasured hands to take you in the sun.